Order and roll call.
Great. Committee member Breeding. Committee member Breeding.
Present.
Committee member Fasoon.
Here.
Committee member Larson.
Here.
Vice Chair Merchant.
Here.
Committee member Mira Venkatesh.
Here.
Committee member Peterson.
Here.
Chair Chen.
Here.
Great.
Wow, everybody's here.
All right. And I'll move forward with the land acknowledgement. So the city of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The city of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from December 15th.
Before we move forward with this one, I'll note that I made a small error in not putting that the land acknowledgement was read in the past tense, and I included it in the future tense and then included the full blurb. And there's a new format that I should have put it into. So I will change that on a new version of the minutes before it is finalized, as long as that's okay with the committee. So I would recommend that minor edit. Other edits, though, or suggestions? Anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay,
Second.
great. Committee member Breeding,
Aye.
committee member Fasoon,
Aye.
committee member Larson,
Aye.
vice chair Merchant,
Yes.
committee member Mira Venkatesh,
Yes.
committee member Peterson,
Yes.
chair Chen.
Aye.
Great. Okay. Motion carries.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. So for anybody who'd like to address this body on an item that's not currently on the agenda, this is the time to speak. I see that we have several attendees in the audience. If you are on Zoom and you wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand now.
I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'll give it one more second. No members of the public with their hand raised.
All right. The next item on the agenda is item 4-1, announcements on sustainability events and resources.
Awesome. Just one resource I want to highlight today. The Alameda County Clean Water Program is tasked with enforcing the Federal Clean Water Act in our jurisdiction. And today they launched a new virtual game to teach young learners about how to protect the bay. To play or to spread the word, please visit cleanwatergame.com. In addition, throughout the 2022 growing and gardening season, the Clean Water Program is offering free monthly webinars about organic gardening and non-toxic pest control in association with Our Water, Our World. Classes are presented by Suzanne Bontempo and Charlotte Canner, both certified integrated pest management advocates. Visit cleanwaterprogram.org for more. If there are no questions on sustainability events and resources, I'll move on to an East Bay Community Energy update. Great. Based on preliminary numbers that reflect opt-outs and opt-downs due to the outreach we conducted before the change took effect on January 1st, we're seeing only a very small number of accounts that have transitioned out of EBCE or down to Bright Choice. The committee will receive a more comprehensive update in the spring when opt-out and opt-down numbers more accurately reflect the transition that took in January 1st. Right now, the numbers likely only reflect those who chose to opt down or out based on the letters and social media we sent out and shared. But I have a feeling the numbers will be a more accurate reflection of the change once folks start to see the rate change on their energy bill. So we will provide that update in either February or March. Any questions on that one? Okay. Then an update on city-owned electric vehicle charging. I don't have too much of an update, but I can share that the City of Albany Public Works Department, which will be the department tasked with actually putting in electric vehicle chargers, will be presenting an update on implementation of the capital improvement plan at an upcoming city council meeting, likely in the spring timeframe. That's all I know about it at this time, but we should have a better idea of when public chargers will be installed after that capital improvement plan discussion at the council level. Short announcements today. Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, is it okay to ask a question about city-owned electric vehicles? I think there was a specific question that came from the public that we were following up on, in that there was a grant for 5 city-located charge stations. I don't think they were public. Maybe they were going to make them public. But are we talking about the same thing? Public Works still has those funds and they're moving on that?
I don't believe that grant is still active. So it was a small grant to cover a portion of the costs that would go towards putting in city-owned electric vehicle chargers. I don't believe those grant funds are available anymore, but the city still has plans to put in electric vehicle chargers. The timing of which I'm not totally sure when.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions? Chair Chen, I'm not sure if we should open it up to public comment at this time.
Yeah, let's open it up to public comment.
Quiet crowd, no hands raised. Back to you, Chair Chen.
All right. The next item on the agenda is presentations, starting with 5-1, advisory body reminders.
Yes. Let me share my screen. Can you all see my presentation slides? That I've started all the way. You can all see it? I can't see your faces, so. Okay, great.
Yeah,
okay.
Looks great.
So this is just a presentation I've given the last 3 Januaries as a reminder of expectations for those who serve on advisory bodies. So for everyone here on the Climate Action Committee, just some basic overview about the things to keep in mind as we move forward with our 2022 Climate Action Year. So a quick overview. The purpose of the Climate Action Committee is to serve as a technical advisory committee regarding matters related to climate action and to advise council on matters related to reducing greenhouse gases and adapting to climate change. This is the committee purpose that is also listed on the committee's work plan, and it is a council delegated purpose. Each committee or commission in the city of Albany has a council defined purpose. So just a reminder of what this committee's is. The reason the City of Albany and the City Council has advisory bodies is to advise council on matters within the committee's scope of responsibility. That includes providing technical analysis, making policy recommendations, and engaging the public on plans and programs. The scope of responsibility is defined in the 2021-2023 work plan, which was approved by council in 2021, but that the committee will also be taking a look at this evening, which is why I included a bullet that said the committee is to prioritize items on the existing work plan during this evening's meeting. Attendance, policy, and quorum requirements. Members are expected to attend and arrive on time to all regular and special meetings. If you are unable to attend a meeting and you have advance awareness of that, please notify me so that I can keep track of who is planning to or not planning to be there. One of a really frustrating thing can be is if we reach the start of our meeting and we're not sure who's coming or who's not, especially if it means that we don't have a quorum and we're waiting for a quorum. Excessive absenteeism, which I think counts as 3 meetings during a calendar year, since there's only typically 11 of them, is grounds for removal from the committee. And the reason we have that is because if you have a seat on an advisory body, it is seen as a position of leadership in the community. And if you hold a seat in a position of leadership and are not using it, we would like to open that seat up for someone else who would. Our Climate Action Committee quorum is 4 members. Just as a reminder, we always need 4 members in order to start a meeting. It also means that we cannot have more than 4 members of the committee interacting outside of a meeting. That's an important note too. The Brown Act. A quote from the Brown Act: "The public commissions, boards, and councils and other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly." This is just a reminder of the intent of the Brown Act. I know sometimes it can be frustrating that we have to work within the confines of the Brown Act, but it is a law that exists in order to help the public be able to engage in policy making and decision making that affects them directly. So it has a meaningful purpose. A few Brown Act reminders. All public meetings must be properly noticed and open to the public. You'll notice that I email this committee every Friday before the Wednesday meeting because as a result of the Brown Act, we are legally required to post our agenda 72 hours in advance of the meeting, which means that it must be posted by the end of the day Friday. Members shall not discuss or make decisions on CAC-related matters outside of a public meeting, particularly, like I said on the last slide, if it's more than 4 members or more than 3 members of the committee. Committee members cannot discuss, deliberate, or decide on matters not listed on the agenda. Very special circumstances are exempted. For example, if this were the city council and there were an emergency ordinance that needed to go, perhaps that could be tacked onto agenda, but that is typically not something an advisory body would do, as we don't deal with too many true time-sensitive emergency decisions that we can't agendize. And again, the reason we do this is because we want to make sure that anyone from the public who wanted to be a part of the decision-making process on an item would have more than enough notice to be able to know that they should tune into the meeting and have their voice heard. So that's, I know, another thing we sometimes run into, but we really can't be discussing items that we haven't properly agendized and noticed the public that there's a potential decision coming. And then again, the big one that I think I've said about 4 times now, a quorum, which is 4 or more members, may not communicate with each other directly or indirectly through whatever medium, including email, text, social media, to develop collective concurrence or make decisions, because again, that means that a quorum of the body would be making a decision without the ability for a member of the public who's not on the body to have their voice heard. Some reminders about meetings. All meetings must be conducted in compliance with the Brown Act, of course. If you can tell, I'm really trying to make sure we all remember the Brown Act. Do not discuss, deliberate, or decide on matters before hearing all public comment on items not on the agenda. Proper discussion format is always presentation/report, CAC member questions, public comment, then decision and discussion. And you'll notice that sometimes either I or the chair will remind the committee not to go too deep into discussion because we haven't heard public comment yet. This is not because we want to interrupt the flow of conversation or stymie discussion. It's because we want to make sure we are following the proper procedure to make sure that our members of the public can have their voice heard before a decision is made. This committee's established start time is 7 p.m. and the established end time is 9 p.m. And every meeting that we want to extend beyond 9 p.m. requires a motion for extension. Now, five golden rules of an effective advisory body member. Remember that as a member of this advisory body, you're not only representing yourself and your own opinions and views, but you're representing the whole city and your community. And therefore, you should consider all sides and all voices and make sure that you are taking into account that the decisions made on this body affect those living in our community. Keep the lines of communication open, but not too open. Make sure you're communicating with me about ideas you have, or if you're not going to be able to attend the meeting. Do your homework and be thorough in making recommendations. Always come having read all the memos or reviewing any documentation in advance so we don't have folks making decisions without having read up on the issue entirely. Be conscious of the relationship with City Council and city staff. This committee will be more successful if we all recognize that we're working together to accomplish the objectives on the work plan, and also that we all have equal responsibility towards making sure that items before us get done, and that it takes time inside and outside of meetings. And establish good working relationships with other members. I think, like with all things in life, respect and kindness go a long way and ultimately help us be more productive as a team. That is all I have for our reminders. And I know I shared a long memo with everyone, and I hope you read that as one of your 5 rules of an effective advisory body member doing homework. But if anyone has questions, I can take those now. Chair Chen, I'll let you call on folks.
All right, Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, there was a bullet early on that said, do not discuss or make agreements on ahead of time. If we're, I mean, obviously, if we're on a subcommittee, that's okay. That's like an ad hoc committee. It's just like, I know being on other bodies that meet and have some chats with non-quorum numbers of committee members, that's still okay, right? I mean, if we're generally talking about things, we're not discussing and making decisions, we're just talking about things that might overlap with issues that come before the Climate Action Committee. So it's not like you can't have any discussion at all with any other Climate Action Committee representative. I know you can't do series things, and you always have to be mindful is if you do have a discussion and then they have a discussion, then it could violate the Act. But I'm thinking more where you're fairly certain it's only between the two of you.
I think if you're fairly certain it's only between the two of you and you recognize that one more person can't go tell one more person, then I think that would be fine. Just be careful, particularly if that communication is happening over social media or email or text. Make sure no one is forwarding messages along, because that's actually where I think it's more likely to happen than even by word of mouth.
Yeah, there was some talk earlier last year where we got this indication that you could also be violating the Brown Act if, say, you were talking to another, like someone on another commission or committee, and maybe someone on the council and knew that was kind of a no-no also. Is that still the thought that you want to just lump all city related entities together and not talk to more than, not discuss things that are on your preview, even if it isn't within the committee members?
That I'm not sure about. I don't think so.
I guess the only reason I bring that up is I'll have I have a monthly meeting with the person who appointed me, and we'll talk about things that are coming before the Climate Action Committee. And it's only the two of us. And it's to sort of be on the same page and pick one another's brain and, get some thoughts and ideas. It's not like trying to circumvent public input or whatever. It's just keeping us both appraised of what we're working on.
Yes.
Is that risky behavior or no?
No, that's actually encouraged. Okay. We encourage advisory body members to chat with the council members who appointed you. And yeah, that would not be a violation of the Brown Act, as long as you're not inviting two council members and or two Climate Action Committee members.
Right, and then when we have correspondence, there's some emails, sometimes it's always between the two of us. It's, I don't rope in others. I might at some point, if it has a relevancy to something coming up and I want to talk to you about, I might forward it on to you, but discussion with staff members does that fall in that? Okay. No,
we are not. Yeah, we can join a group of 3+ committee members and it won't be a violation of the Brown Act because we don't have any decision-making authority.
Good. I feel I understand it pretty clearly.
Yeah, great questions. Other questions? Chair Chen, should we open it for public comment if there are any?
Yeah, let's do so.
Okay. Any members of the public would like to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing none, back to you, Chair Chen.
Okay, so the next presentation is item 5-2, advancing equity through climate action and adaptation projects.
Wonderful. I'll be sharing this presentation. I'm not certain that this is yet full screen. Give me 1 second. Oh, that did not help. Play. Here we go. Oh, I apologize for the trouble with font size here. But this presentation is going to go over some best practices in equity and how we should be considering equity in climate action and adaptation projects, both as staff and as advisory body members for the Climate Action Committee. This is based on current best practices and trainings that I've received as a Civic Spark Fellow, and we thought that this meeting would be a wonderful time to address it right before we go into prioritization of work plan projects for the year, given that we want equity to be at the heart of the work that we're doing to move our community forward. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump into some definitions first, provided by the US EPA. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Now, said fair treatment means no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of the negative environmental consequences resulting from industrial, governmental, and commercial operations or policies. Furthermore, in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, we define sustainability under a number of pillars, but these three being the most important. We see that environmental quality, which on its face is the main pillar of sustainability, is in fact paired with a few other metrics, that being social equity and the local economy. With this, being said, we must consider how to expand our understanding of climate action beyond work that is focused directly on the climate, but rather on community resiliency. We know that climate burdens are distributed disproportionately on communities without the resources to adapt. So we must take an expansive definition of climate action that will support the economic and social health of communities that have been burdened. Examples of community resiliency. Once more, I apologize for the titles on top not showing properly. But in order to support community resiliency, I've listed a number of ways that an expansive view of climate action and community resiliency would help uplift all of us. We are not in the place to be able to ask all communities to contribute fairly. And through strategies like these, we are able to uplift everyone so that we can participate in climate solutions together. So to begin, I listed reducing traffic violence and unemployment in Black, Indigenous, and people of color or BIPOC communities. We know that BIPOC people in our community are more likely to live in apartments, which in Albany tend to be concentrated along our busier thoroughfares. This subjects those residents to increased air and noise pollution, and also to traffic violence, which is the idea that the traffic conditions that we live in, whether it's crossing the street or participating as a motorist or cyclist on busier, more dangerous streets, is a form of violence. Through a policy like working toward ending disparities in employment between our communities, whether they are Black, white, Asian, what have you, will be able to help close gaps that allow people to participate in climate action. Increasing access to clean air and water is fairly clear. But another way in which we can hope to bring about equity in our community is through supporting secure, stable, and abundant housing for all, along with addressing educational achievement gaps and supporting the land back movement for Indigenous sovereignty. As we think about the ways in which we live on Indigenous land, and this was brought before us just earlier this evening as we read a land acknowledgement, we have to understand that Native people always had been proper stewards of their land, and for us to ask their help in righting our climate injustices is asking a lot of this community because they have seen the destruction and occupation of their land. It can be a significant emotional burden for us to ask for their help. Supporting Indigenous sovereignty, supporting land rights for Indigenous people is one way that we can further equity and healing in our communities. So this title is, How Can the CAC Incorporate Equity Principles into its work? Recognize that one's own situation may differ from others. This could be financial, social, racial. Make concerted efforts to reach out to community members affected by decisions and projects. And in those decisions, make a commitment for financial or institutional support for those who would face burdens from policies or decisions being made. Now, we have some more best practices for equity continued. Prioritize projects addressing equity disparities in work plans. Encourage more racial and socioeconomic diversity in decision-making bodies. And provide compensation to community members for their time and involvement in climate projects. We as staff are working to incorporate these best practices into our own work. An example in the final bullet point is the focus groups that are upcoming for the multifamily EV pilot, in which we are going to look into providing small gifts or compensation, rather, is a more proper word for those tenants who participate in focus groups, with the understanding that we're asking for their time and these tenants may be time burdened. Now, that was a pretty short presentation, but I'd now love to answer any questions and engage in discussion about what equity means and how it can help our community. So with that, I've concluded the presentation on some best practices, and yeah, let's discuss.
Or questions first.
That's what I meant. Questions first.
Thank you for that reminder, Lizzie. Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, I have a question. So, you know, I've looked at the census maps of Albany, and for a small community, I don't think we get the granularity necessary. I mean, they kind of blob over about 5 or so areas in Albany. And I think we have some more sort of micro community type situations. And I'm wondering if there's any effort on the side of the city to do a more detailed demographics study of the communities in Albany. For example, the community with the lowest income level is UC Village, which kind of makes sense because most of the people there are students and aren't in their full earning potential and careers. But that's a very consolidated kind of place, so that kind of makes sense. But then you get into, you know, there's sort of a general income level rise as you go from west to east, with maybe a little bit of an exception around Albany Hill, on the heights of Albany Hill. So what I find is, you know, if you want to target, like we're doing now, we want to target outreach for certain communities to be involved in climate action or in even the multifamily EV program. Is there this tool available where we have a finer granularity of where these communities are in our city?
That tool does not exist to the best of my knowledge, but we are working on ensuring that our messaging reaches renters, which tend to have lower incomes than the city homeowner average. We're working to ensure application eligibility for certain programs that is tied to income rather than geographical location. But we also understand that there are equity disparities in the community that do not present themselves purely on racial or income lines, but on past segregatory decisions that we hope to address in coming work as well.
So Nick, I know that a lot of planning now references CalEnviroscreen.
Yeah.
Johnny, you may have more familiarity with it than I do at this point. But I encourage you to check out that tool also. It's also not, for the reasons Johnny just mentioned, the most perfect tool, but I think it does get a little bit more in depth than just census data.
I've actually looked at that. It's come up in several other groups that I've been meeting with, and I mean, as far as, you know, environmental issues and impacts, we're really all green and wonderful in Albany. You know, it pretty much comes to that. There might be a little bit again around sort of the Albany Village area, but I don't think it gets any. It doesn't give you a more detailed granularity. And I've kind of, well, anyway, I can comment on that later. So it sounds like the city doesn't have any plans in the works to try to develop a more granular demographics of the city.
I'm not sure. If they are, we have not heard of it yet, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I had a question for Johnny. First of all, thank you so much for putting together the presentation and a detailed memo about it. I think one piece of work that you referenced in that memo was the Oakland Environmental Action Plan. And
That's right.
I skimmed through it. It was a lot of material. I'm kind of curious if there were any parts of that plan that particularly stood out to you that you'd like to highlight.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to answer that because I did not address that just now in my presentation. I referenced that document predominantly because I think that it is the best example locally or regionally that I've found that understands that climate equity is not a matter of simply climate-focused projects. And I think that even a skim through of that document highlights all of the different ways in which our climate is so much more than simply the environment, and the ways that I think our committee could learn to broaden how it considers climate action amongst different communities. If you'd like, I can take some time and find some more detailed paragraphs to pull out for the committee at a later time, but I referenced that document because predominantly I think that it captures best the spirit of the presentation in that we must work to uplift our communities and meet them where they're at in order to ask that those less fortunate than or those just with different conditions than us participate in climate action equally.
All right. Do we have any other questions from other members of the committee? Vice Chair Merchant?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know if you could answer this, but I'm sort of wondering like whether when we're looking at equity, whether we should be looking just beyond the borders of Albany or whether the focus of this committee is really around what we should be doing within our own city. Because I know at the last meeting we had the discussion around suggesting that we use Measure DD funds to get air purifiers for lower income people in the event of more wildfire smoke. I'm just wondering if it starts to get too far afield from what we're doing here, because the impact that we're having within Albany, given the cars that we drive beyond our city limits and other ways that we're consumers of goods that come from outside of our borders, have impacts on other communities. And I just wonder how much you might think that our concerns should extend beyond Albany, or whether we're better left focusing on what we can do within our own community.
My understanding with this body is that while we need to take into consideration the ways in which our actions are externalized upon others, I don't think it's within our purview to make decisions on support that's on material support outside our borders. I think though that speaking personally, that air purifier proposal is a strong way to support the environmental health and personal well-being of lower income community members who maybe have jobs that expose them otherwise to more poor air quality, or don't have the financial resources to participate as healthfully as others in our community. I think that that proposal well captures the idea that our general environment is uplifted by working to target those with less income. I'm sorry, I think I'm speaking fairly roundabout here, but I do believe that we have to consider our externalities upon others, but I don't believe that it's within this decision-making body's like purview to make decisions that affect people outside the borders.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I can just add to what Johnny said too. And yeah, Johnny, thank you for answering that question. I think where it gets tricky is that our city council, which this committee is making recommendations to wouldn't have the authority to make a decision, say, for another jurisdiction. And that's where it would be great if we could make, decisions that impact our entire community beyond borders of that which we have jurisdiction over. But the logistical side of it is we can't enforce ordinances that are not within the bounds of our jurisdiction. But we can find other ways.
I was thinking less about ordinances and more just about like resources, since we're a pretty affluent community relative to some of the surrounding communities. But I understand that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And to be honest, I'm not totally sure. I know we can recommend that council support resolutions or endorse legislation that would impact communities outside of our borders. And maybe that's a way that we could get involved in the sense, I think, where you're going. And yeah, we can definitely find opportunities for that if that's, yes.
Any other questions from the committee? Shall we open it up to the public?
Yes. At this time, if any members of the public would like to speak on item 5-2, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature on Zoom. No hands. We have a huge audience this evening, but so far quiet. Back to you, Chair Chen.
All right, so that concludes presentations for this evening. The next agenda item is item 6-1 for discussion, the 2021 to 2023 Climate Action Committee Work Plan. Before we go there, Committee Member Peterson, did you have a comment to make?
Yeah, I mean, I thought after we took we did our questions, public comment, now we'd have discussion. And I had a couple thoughts to follow on the presentation that Johnny presented, just some ideas. I'm not sure if we're supposed to, this was just more educational, I guess, but I thought it was this concept of being equitable and bringing in all members of the community does kind of trouble me a bit. In Albany, we tend to see the same people involved a lot of the time, which is great. They have great civic spirit, but we're not including everyone. So primarily, I mean, I think before we got into trying to just making the assumption, oh, we're a pretty advantaged community, we should help outside of Albany, I think we need to do a better study of who's challenged and where they are in Albany. And I'm not sure how we can convey that information to whoever would look into that, but is that possible?
I can see first if any other bodies or staff is already doing this, because this is a little bit out of what Johnny and I focus on every day. So we can look into it and see if it's already being done and if there's a mechanism for doing it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's something that could be done. I don't personally, I'm not an expert in the field, know what that would look like.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, I know the school district has come up against this quite a bit, especially lately with trying to get better representation of BIPOC students and families in the schools and get them more included and inclusive, especially the fallout from past events. And it might be good to touch bases with superintendent or something. Again, I don't know if where data analysis and population understanding falls in the realm of the city staff, if it's the clerk or who. It might just be that as a small community, we don't do that on our own. We just bank on larger state and federal efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's stymied us a bit. So that's why I kind of bring up, maybe we can follow up on that. At least find out if someone in the city has a focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have any other comments on item 5-2? Vice Chair Merchant?
I was just going to say, I think this might come up again tonight, just in the context of, I know that we're discussing the priority items to work on in our work plan for the year. That's, I guess, the next item up on the agenda. And I think this would be an important lens to look at some of the things that we're prioritizing for our work for this year.
Any last thoughts? Okie doke. Well, I think that's an excellent place to start on item 6-1, the 2021 to 2023 Climate Action Committee Work Plan. I believe that this item was suggested during the last meeting of the year in December because there was a little bit of confusion around some of the items that were being presented. So yeah, Lizzie, I was wondering if you had any other thoughts on opening this discussion.
Absolutely. It was recommended, I think, by Chair Chen during the December meeting. And also, we do recommend that advisory bodies revisit the work plan in the beginning of the new year of the 2-year term, just to refamiliarize themselves with what is currently on the work plan to help determine projects the committee would like to prioritize tackling both in the beginning of the new year and then over the course of the year. I will note that it is a requirement that if any of the words on this document change this evening, it will have to restart the process of getting this approved by the city council. And I would encourage, it's from what I got from the last meeting, it was less about redrafting the work plan and more about looking at what items are already listed and reprioritizing them. I think that's something I recommend as staff. You all are welcome to propose what you would like. I would recommend not changing any of the text on this document so that it doesn't have to go back into the process of being reapproved by the council. Although if the committee truly wanted to change the work plan, you're welcome to. But I envision this, or my recommendation would be that the committee takes a look at items already listed and talk through priorities for starting certain items in the new year. So at this time, I can share the work plan. I'm going to significantly zoom out. This is the work plan. I know it's small, but I think this is the only way I'm able to show it all on one screen. I think we can remember that this one's up here. So zoom in a little bit. Okay, maybe that's a little bit better. So perhaps what I would recommend doing is first we can, if anyone has questions on what I just said, we can do questions and then public comment, and then the committee can dive into discussion. So any questions?
I did have a question that maybe isn't directly covered in the work plan. We've worked on a number of items that relate to Measure DD funding. I'm curious if we have a total amount of Measure DD funding that's been appropriated so far or planned for, and a better estimate of how much is available.
That's a good question. The answer is I currently do not have that, but it was requested recently, I believe, at the council level. So I think that is to come. And then the committee could definitely see that as well. Chair Chen, I'll let you call in folks unless you want me to.
Here's my.
I'm actually, I think, stuck on the same document.
Okay, no worries. I can call in people while you figure that out.
See.
Committee member Larson.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on Chair Chen's statement or question, I guess it was actually, because there's new people on, and you know, some of us have the historic knowledge and others don't. But the DD funds are not allocated to climate action. They're money that is designed for use in climate action, but it's not actually allocated, formally, specifically dedicated to this. So we get to propose programs and ways of spending that, but it's not. I mean, the way that you said it, Chair Chen, I didn't know if you knew, or I think you do, but anyway, just so everybody knows, it's not money that like goes into a bank account for a climate action committee. It's available for programs, and it's about a third of the DD funds, which I think we've calculated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 300,000 is what we're thinking it will be, right, for annual amount, something like that. Just round numbers, right?
I think so. But yeah, that report is supposed to go to council soon, I believe.
Yeah. So just, minor clarifications, just so everybody knows, it's not money that's just sitting waiting for us to spend it. I mean, it is, but it's not allocated. I don't know if I'm saying it quite right, but anyway.
Committee member Peterson?
Yeah, I'm not, yeah. Just to follow on what Eric said, yeah, the Measure DD, actually the funds go into the general fund, and there was a voter's request that the city council endeavor, the word used was endeavor, to use these funds for implementing climate action and adaptation plan policies and programs. And Eric's right, the 1/3 of the DD revenue would be somewhere in the realm of $250,000 a year if it works out the way we thought. It's a tax, so it's dependent on usage of utilities. Folks on the council are working very hard to make sure that the council does honor that effort and does, in fact, make sure that we do start using those funds, so that it's kind of a two-edged sword. It's like they're not dedicated, but we need to request them so that the council sees that they are being used for that purpose, and that they are valuable. And that has the other added benefit is when the taxpayers ask, well, what's happened with these? We can actually show real programs, real results. So it's very important that we do prioritize those and make sure they're in our plan.
Do we have any more questions on the work plan discussion? perhaps now would be a good time to take it to the public.
Okay. If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature on Zoom. No hands raised. Give it one more second. Okay, back to you, Chair Chen.
All right, so let's discuss this item. One way that I thought we could start is by sort of similar to the consent calendar. I think that it'd be worth sort of discussing items that are already finished on the work plan separately. So I think by default, we should assume that nothing on this work plan is completed, but I would like to hear from the committee any items that we think are done that don't sort of warrant further prioritization or discussion. And I have my own thoughts on this, but I'd love to talk to other members of the committee first. If there's something that you'd like to pull that you think that isn't worth discussing because we've finished working on it, let's start with that. Committee member Peterson.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Usually I blow the questions by launching into dialogue, but now I've got a question. So we spent a lot of time putting together this work plan and very carefully crafting each statement in these, that's why there was direct reference to Measure DD funds, because it was really critical to get those in play and used and getting real tangible results from those. But is it fine to assume that, for example, building electrification A, we could have several things that we advise the city council on? We had this number B where we establish, policy of, elimination of natural gas. That's somewhat off the table right now, but under A, there could be several different concepts that we come up with and implement. And right now we're, only looking at a very limited number. So it isn't like you can say, well, we've done one item under that, so it's a done deal. This is a pretty big category, as is zero emission transportation. And then green infrastructure might tailor down a little more. I think it was highly focused on trying to get more shade trees planted. But the other concern I have is that I think members of the public may have some thoughts after we discuss this in full. And would it be possible to go back to the public after we've had our discussion and they have a more thorough kind of understanding of what it is we're sort of prioritizing here?
I think those are both excellent points. Lizzie, can we start with the second question?
Yeah, I think that is up to you, Chair Chen.
I think that sounds like a great idea. So yeah, let's discuss this a little bit and then maybe go back to the public. For the
I'm going to interject real quick. One thing we do want to avoid is a back and forth with the public. So I think the committee should decide a time when we will open it for public comment and then take all public comment in one go and then close it. And that'll be it for the public comment, because if we keep opening it, closing it, opening it, closing it, we're kind of having a dialogue, which we are not supposed to do. So whenever you feel like we're ready, we'll open it up to everybody, take all public comment, and then close it again.
Okay, great. And yeah, to address your first point, Committee Member Peterson, I think that's a great point, and that's partially why I sort of wanted to start by making sure that we are all aligned on things that are still remaining to be done and things that are not. Because like you mentioned, I think that we have taken many actions that may fulfill parts of the work plan, but I want to make sure that everyone agrees that, say, we're done with 1A before we completely deprioritize it, for example. So yeah, I think that's a great question. So if there are any work items that you believe we've partially implemented, I would say don't pull them off of the work plan for now. This would be purely things that we think are completely done and wrapped up and don't need to occur in the rest of this cycle. Sorry, one more point I wanted to make. This is unrelated. I would like to remind everybody that the work plan does run from July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of 2023. So it does not line up with the calendar year. That means that we are about a quarter of the way through this current work plan cycle. So just a reminder that I think in the past, there's been a little confusion about calendar year versus work plan year. Yeah, take a minute to look through these items, think about things that you believe are completely done. I know this might be a little bit challenging for newer members of the committee. And Lizzie, perhaps we can go around and just get a poll from people on items to remove from further consideration for this work plan cycle.
Okay. I can go in order. So first would be, well, I'm just going to randomly. Committee Member Fasoon.
Hi. Right, sorry, I didn't hear, my internet completely cut off just there. Can you repeat that?
I think we're going around the virtual dais and having committee members comment on which items you think are done and should be pulled. Correct, Chair Chen?
Yeah, so if there are any items in the work plan that you think we're completely finished with, feel free to recommend that they be removed at this time.
I also apologize. I should not have called on Committee Member Fasoon first because she is our newest member. I will go first to Vice Chair Merchant.
I think there's work that we could do on all of these items. I don't see any that I would recommend removing.
Committee Member Larson.
Same comment. Everything's still relevant. We haven't nothing to come off.
Okay. Committee Member Mira Venkatesh.
Yeah, I have the same comment. And one thing to add is it would be interesting if we could track level of completion, right? Whether it's, for instance, 50% complete or 70% complete, then we just may have some perspective on where we're nearly there and what needs to be worked on more, if that makes sense. Because at this point, it's hard to sort of get transparency in what something being incomplete or sort of open actually means.
Okay, Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, so the one thing I think we maybe need to back off on putting huge amounts of time in, because we've done it a lot and it's only gained a minimal benefit, was 5B, carbon-free Albany. And I kind of hate to say that because this was one of my big things I really thought would be very successful. I think it's been moderately compared to how, I've looked at other cities and looked at their penetration, and Albany has similar penetration. But we've had it for a long time and it doesn't seem to be growing or gaining much. I wouldn't say we abandon it. I'm just saying at this point, we shouldn't do specific efforts just on it. It can certainly be tangential efforts, like if we're doing outreach to multifamily housing for EV, you can also say, hey, by the way, guys, there's this thing you can use. But I think at this point, it's got to sort of show its benefit on it. We put a lot of effort into it, and I don't think we should expend much more time specifically on that. That's the one I would say.
I will note that I think the Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee did do a wonderful job last year of putting some work into this item. So I'm neutral as a staff person, but I would suggest that the subcommittee also weigh in on that, because I don't know if the subcommittee that has been meeting has input on that item specifically. So we can go back to Vice Chair Merchant.
Yeah, we did put together that whole forum, and it did not drive up participation in the way that we hoped. So I think in the wake of that, we've sort of shifted how we might approach community engagement around that platform, where if there are particular groups that we introduce it to, then we would be available to offer sort of technical assistance and strategic assistance and helping them get onboarded with the platform. But I think that we might be reaching the end of just sort of like general efforts of community engagement and outreach. So with committee member Fasoon, we had talked potentially about bringing it to the high school, or if there are other larger groups. We have exchanged some emails with the owner of Feel Good, and just sort of like more kind of targeted people within the community who might have access to a larger group of members or participants or students that would be interested in doing a challenge around it and looking to use and engage with the platform. I think that might be the way to go. I don't know if Committee Member Larson wants to add to that at all or weigh in.
No, that's perfectly said.
And then Committee Member Fasoon, I know I unfairly started with you because you were the newest to this work plan, but at this time with you just making the way back around the circle, have thoughts. And then Chair Chen, I'll let you take it away again.
Yeah, my internet was being really bad, so my apologies for that. But I also wanted to echo what committee member Mira Venkatesh said about having a place where you can kind of track how far things are down the line. But otherwise, I feel like all of these are, they're going and they're doing well in the process. And yeah, we're definitely working, as Committee Member Merchant said, on engaging other groups who have a lot of like students or other fellow people in the neighborhood and area. So that's also something that's been a big part of this and will also help move forward more than one of these things, actually. So, yeah.
Chair Chen, I think you're the last one.
Yeah, I guess the two items that I'd like considered for being done, I'd start with 5A, focusing outreach on three-party issues to communicate to the community. I must admit, I haven't been following this super closely, but I think with the community forum, I'd say that we're in a pretty good place to not necessarily expend a ton more time on this, but I would love to hear if the subcommittee feels differently about that. And then this is perhaps very specific, but item 2B1, I think in particular for electric vehicle charging access, I think with the EV charging pilot program, we've largely accomplished I think a pretty substantial effort for increasing access to electrical vehicle charging for this work cycle. So I do think there are other aspects to item 2B, zero emission transportation plan that might make sense to pursue, but I think it might be worth tabling focusing on electric vehicle charging specifically. So I guess the three items that we listed under consideration as just being done were, I guess, 2B1, 5A, and 5B. I guess I don't think I necessarily got a firm sense of whether we could call any of these done or not. So perhaps I could just go through that list and discuss each one of them. And if it seems contentious enough, perhaps put it to a vote on whether to keep those under discussion for the next phase of prioritization for the work plan or not. Does that seem like a good plan? All right. I guess starting with 2B1, increasing access to electrical vehicle charging. Do we feel like that's done or that we should have more work on it. I see two hands. Let's start with Committee Member Larson. I think you were several milliseconds faster in raising your hand than Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, thanks. I would say it's not done. I think we have taken one step in that, which is it's fantastic that we've gotten started on that. But I think that this is such a rich area that I think we should keep it open and keep on exploring new other ways, or expanding pilot, or another different pilot program. I think there's a lot more breadth to that one thing that we can explore. So I'd like to keep it on.
Okay, Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, I agree with Eric. You know, this goes back to the other to the comments that a couple other committee members have made about sort of having some way to track where we are. And what I kind of think of is going back to the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. There are many aspects of doing zero emission transportation, and around that, and each one of them really isn't done until it's successful and meets certain milestones of what's happening. I mean, we can tick it off and say we've started it, I guess, but I wouldn't say it's done. And the other thing that is interesting about the B1 is that this one references the point of sale requirements, which we actually have another subcommittee looking at and have some things we'll be discussing a little bit later. So I tend to agree with Eric that I don't think, people are concerned that we're not getting anything done in the work plan. That's not it. We started a couple things, but there's more to start. So you can't just shut the door on the thing. As was mentioned, we've got a year and 3/4 left of stuff to do. And some of it will be under getting charge points and implementing the Zero Emission Transportation Action Plan recommendations. So, these were all done pretty generally so that we could try to get as much done under each one as possible. I guess what we might want to do is say, where have we started something and it looks like it's well started and progressing? Maybe that's a better way to look at this. And if we have some ones that haven't gotten enough attention yet, we may want to put some more effort into that.
Okay, I think given those comments, I'm happy to leave it in the work plan. I guess the next item under consideration for being done was 5A, which was focusing outreach proactively on 3 high priority issues to address the Albany community. Do we feel like that one's done? I'm seeing some head shakes. Committee Member Larson, would you like to make a comment on it?
Sure. I just, no, I don't think it's done. I agree with Chair or Committee Member Merchant that I can see deprioritizing that. We've tried on 5B. I'm not sure what we have, specifically done on 5A. So I wouldn't say that we're done on that, but with some activity there, I think that we've run into some challenges. So I wouldn't make it a high priority, but it's not done.
Committee Member Peterson? Oh, it looks like you're muted.
I was looking at, I can't read the one that's on here, so I'm going to the actual doc. I have kind of an interest in us trying more to put our energies into, I don't know if I want to say, less in the realm of education and more in the realm of incentives and policies. And in that sense, I think we've had some past outreaches and information on that, and there's certainly opportunity to do outreach in each pilot project we're doing. And I think we need to think about partnering with other community organizations and entities like the school district to do more outreach. But I get concerned that we have spent quite a bit of time, especially trying to promote carbon-free Albany over the last 3 years, and reaching out and doing website development, and it's not very clear whether that has garnered the type of response that or escalation of response that it justifies the amount of effort that goes into it. So I'm not saying it isn't valuable. I just say as our priorities, I'd say there's still work to do there. We could potentially work it in as we do other in tandem with outreach efforts on specific projects that have specific goals, but to just have sort of broad, efforts to engage and educate. I think we're somehow we're not succeeding at that as far as for the amount of effort. I don't know if I'm making sense on that anyway. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay, I think I was the one who added 5A to the chopping block, and I trust that the subcommittee has a better view on this. So again, I'm happy to leave that one on the work plan. I think the last one was 5B, which was promote community engagement with carbon-free Albany. Do we feel like that work plan item is still valid for the next 2 years or year and a half? Vice Chair Merchant?
I mean, I think I'm a little stuck on this, on having this like specific goal of 1,000 households, because we've really tried. The efforts that we've been making have been to try and like increase those numbers. And the way that we're talking about it now is a little more in terms of what Nick was saying, where it's still something that we're available to educate and support the community in using, but we aren't making it a priority to sort of actively devote our time toward increasing those numbers toward 1,000 households, just because our efforts so far, it doesn't seem, I agree with Nick that the trade-off, the amount of effort that we're expending, we could be putting toward other things, and we're not getting the increase in the numbers there. So, I mean, I know we're not, I know Lizzie made the point, if we don't want to start editing the text here, because then we would have to resubmit the work plan to get it approved again by City Council. But one of the things that we're not going to be able to work on everything on this work plan this year anyway. So maybe it's just a matter of leaving it on, but not making it one of our key priorities for the year.
Committee Member Peterson, I think you maybe proposed removing this one or calling this one done or finished. Are you okay with leaving it under consideration as something that I guess what I'd like to do next is to go around again and ask people if there's 1 or 2 items in particular that we should focus on for, say, the next 6 months. Are you okay with leaving this item on the work plan for consideration?
Well, thinking in terms of this is that at the end of the 2 years, we'll have, kind of an explanation of what we need to do keep a separate list of the work plan that we'll be working towards our next work plan, where we have accomplishments or initiated actions for each one of these. And I think what I'm saying is we've certainly done enough initiated actions on carbon-free Albany to say that we've done our due diligence on that one for this particular work plan, in my opinion. So I mean, rather than taking things on and off, thinking more in terms of, we would have something we could go back and look, we would take this document and we would add bullets under each item. And under B, we could say, you know, community forum, new thing, this is good enough for now. You know, under building electrification, you know, we have the, I think it's under, you know, we have the appliance swap out incentives going. You know, maybe we want to do something else on that too. So I mean, I guess this whole idea that we're going to line out things and say it's done is a little, you know, it's a little premature, and we haven't really defined what done means. So, because these are, you know, there's no milestone that says when we reach this milestone, we have succeeded. And maybe we need to think about that or have that.
I think that's a good point. I guess what I'm hearing is that we should leave it on the list for further consideration for now. And I take your point that perhaps it was a little premature for me to try to suggest that any of these items were done. Yeah. Oh, Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, and maybe what we want to do is more, you know, we put a certain amount of effort in today. Is it adequate effort for now? And we need to now put effort in something else. So, you know, more like putting a check by something saying, yep, adequate effort for now. And then we'll start to see the ones where we need to, you know, where we have the feeling that we need to do more. You know, some of these lean towards tasks that are, you know, eventual outcomes and milestones in 2035, at least, that are pretty significant. So they need some pretty major actions happening in the next few years.
Okay, so it sounds like everything in the work plan, I think we should consider. Now, one piece of feedback that I took from the previous meeting was that within the committee, we might not be especially aligned on prioritization of these different work items. In particular, I think there was some confusion around what the committee felt the city staff was spending time on was not necessarily in line with priorities of the committee. And I think we haven't necessarily done the best job of making clear what those priorities should be. So similarly to kind of our last round of discussion, I'd love to go around and just get maybe the top 3 priorities from this work plan from every member of the committee. And then if we're wildly divergent on those priorities for, say, the next 6 months, I'd love to have some discussion and try to get more on the same page around it. And, you know, I think another way of thinking about this is making it clear to city staff that from the committee's perspective, these are the things that are important. City staff does not work for the Climate Action Committee. Marching orders do come from the city manager, but I think it's a useful source of input to city staff to understand what is important from the perspective of the committee. So again, I'd say take a moment to look through the work plan items, think about for the next 6 months what you individually feel are the most important items from this, pick 3 of them, and maybe let's go through another round of discussion and yeah, see what comes out of that. And Lizzie, I guess maybe just for fun, we can go in reverse order. I think I've maybe spent a little more time thinking about this than other people have, so I'd be happy to start.
Okay, great. Chair Chen, you're up.
Yeah, so the 3 I would pick are item 3B, develop a community climate disaster resilience plan. I think that's something that is pretty clearly useful, that we've started to make progress on, but we haven't really spent a lot of time on. So I pick 3B. I had a difficulty narrowing this down, but I guess for the next 2, I would go with 1A and 2A. And in general, I feel like it's really important for us to, as a committee, come up with a recommendation for Measure DD spending more holistically. If I'm doing my math correctly, I think that we've recommended programs that are around 75K of the 250K that city staff initially considered that Measure DD might bring in. I think that we should make a recommendation for the rest of it in line with climate goals for Albany. I think in addition to programs that we've recommended, there's also removal of master fee schedule for street planning. I'm not sure how much of the Measure DD revenue was apportioned for that, but sort of in general, I'd love to focus on 1A and 2A, which are Measure DD funding related. So my three are, again, item 3B, Community Climate Disaster Resilience Plan, and then 1A and 2A, or more generally, just Measure DD funding.
Okay, next would be Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have some meeting of the minds here. I really just have the two. I mean, I'd say it's, you know, again, the high priorities are building electrification and zero emission transportation. I think we need more programs that are bringing about, you know, bring those about. I think they fall under the categories of A, B. 1B is highly specific, and we, you know, at this point, essentially, the city council has agreed with the city attorney. We're going to wait till the final fallout from the Berkeley lawsuit happens before Albany does anything related to banning use of gas. So I think 1A, definitely. 2A, definitely. There's a lot more we can do along the lines of other modes of transportation and travel that we could focus on, especially that would benefit renters and low-income residents, which is very critical. And I'll talk again about this thing that's point of sale. So, and then 3B, I know there's I'm involved in some other efforts around disaster preparedness, which are going to go a long way to getting the city organized around all of Albany. And I think that'll be a opportunity to partner with that effort and get more information out about what we're doing for climate, to address, you know, climate change and climate-related disaster events. So I guess I'm totally in agreement with Chair Chan.
Committee Member Mira Venkatesh.
Yeah, I think sort of based on this, I would also agree that 1A and 2A are my highest priority items. I think that 3B would be nice, but I would put 1A and 2A to a little bit higher. One other thing I would say is that 5A, so sort of focusing on proactively reaching out to the community, I think is more of a sort of more of a follow-up to some of our policy actions. So, I mean, I do think that needs to be integrated in there somewhere, but I would say that maybe not as just a standalone item. I would say focusing on the building electrification, the zero emissions transportation, since it seems like quite a bit of work has already been done on those, and sort of closing the loop, making progress, I think would also send a good message to the community.
Vice Chair Merchant.
I put those three as well, the 1A, 2A, and 3B as well. I think there's still a lot of kind of creative and good work we can do in terms of ways to use Measure DD funds, including taking the equity lens that we had talked about earlier. And I think that there's we haven't done as much in terms of the disaster resilience plan. And I know that was something we had identified as something that was important to prioritize. And so I would support including that as well.
Committeemember Larson.
All right. I would say mine are 2A, and then 1A. So and on 2A, when we wrote these, it was specific. We wrote these general so that we would have some latitude in what we did, and knowing that we already had the climate action plan ratified, done. Consultants, went through city council, and I went through before this meeting. Just went through the climate action plan again, and there's, you could pick off 6 items out of the climate action plan that are more detailed than this, that apply to this, and are the beginnings of a program or something that we could actually, do some budgeting and do some proposals to city council. So I think that, this is generally written, and it's a little scary sometimes to look at that and go, oh my God, what are we going to do with that? But we already have the climate action plan, so it already has the next level of detail in it. So 2A and then 1A would be my priorities.
No third priority?
I mean, 3A, I guess.
Okay. And Committeemember Fasoon.
I said 1A and 3B on reasons that were already said. And might be biased, but I did put 4A because as a student, obviously I go to AUSD, so yeah, this could be a biased reasoning, but I feel like engaging Albany schools and kind of younger people in sustainable energy and everything related to climate could also raise like the next generation of environmental leaders in our community who end up growing up and taking positions like we are on the Climate Action Committee and actually holding these positions in the future. So engaging them early on while they're still, in school could also be really beneficial, but also highlighting the 1A and 3B.
Awesome. That is, Committeemember Breeding.
Sorry, I had technical difficulties. I'd say 3A, 2A, and 1A, and focusing on advising on how to use Measure D is an effective use of our time as a committee.
Okay. I think that is everyone.
Okie doke. So I guess what I'm hearing in general, it seems like we are actually pretty aligned on prioritization. It seems like the focus is in general 1A, 2A, and then to some extent 1 or 2 of the other items. So that is something that I think is definitely important to keep in mind for planning the next couple of meetings. And I'd also urge city staff to consider the set of priorities when thinking about initiatives to take on or different work items to pursue. And I guess, were there any other points of discussion or anything else that anyone wanted to bring up before we bring it back to the public one more time? Committeemember Larson?
I wasn't quite clear. Is this questions or is this discussion?
Sorry, I think this is discussion, but Committeemember Peterson pointed out that it might be useful to get another round of public feedback after we had our discussion, since I think this was a fairly broad discussion.
So can I make a comment then?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess my comment was, when we did the charging station pilot program, we worked for months on how to build a proposal that could actually get to city council, that this committee would ratify. And I think that we went through a lot of learning on how to create a proposal that's sort of appropriate for this committee. And so I think that we still probably need to get more efficient at that, because there's it seems to be a bit of a sweet spot for, defined enough to make a budget to give to city council so that they know what they're being asked to do, but not over defined to the point where it takes us a year just to define it. So I guess I'm looking maybe at Lizzie and Johnny as probably, I feel like I could still use some help on how to create the proposal. Like I said, in the climate action plan, there's 6 different items that I would love to do in the zero transportation action area. Taking that and how to make those proposals for city council would probably be a good technique to learn how to do.
Yeah. I think just quickly, I think the reason that proposal went so smoothly was because it followed a really good process of a subcommittee put in a lot of work behind the scenes, developed a proposal for this whole committee. This whole committee provided very tangible feedback, went back to the subcommittee incorporated the feedback, brought it back. The committee made a proposal, and then that proposal recommended a proposal to council, and then staff took it from there. I think that is kind of the best process for actually getting something through. I think sometimes we fall into a cycle of, we'll have an idea, there will be very, very high level feedback, not a whole lot of tangible next steps, come back and do that a few times. And I think that one worked well because it was very specific. And then when a proposal was done and went to council, staff took it on and is now working on implementing it. Like Johnny mentioned, he and Michelle are actually going to start those focus groups in the very near future. So it's actually getting done. Chair Chen, should we open it up for comment?
Yeah, any last thoughts before we open it up for comment? Oh, Committee Member Larson?
Sorry, I was waiting to see if anybody else was going to say anything. I wanted to give everybody the chance. But it was just on my mind because I talked to my city council person. And one of the things that was, another thing to keep in mind is this piecemeal approach of one thing at a time is sometimes good and sometimes not. And so city council has kind of said they'd like to know a little bit more about what's coming. So I'm not sure how to, give city council, like, here's our top 10 things that we're looking at, and it's about this amount. I don't know if they need that information, want that information. Again, staff, maybe you can help us with how to navigate that.
Are you talking specifically with Measure DD?
Yes.
Okay, I think there's been a request for finance to do that. I will look into that. Okay. Should we open it for public comment?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. At this time, if any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. I see we have 1 member of the public with their hand raised. 2. 3. Hang on, we're going to pull up the clock. Lucinda?
Yes. Is it possible to get the climate action, the priorities up on the screen again? So I don't remember the numbers of if not, if that's too hard. I don't remember the number, but one of the priorities, I think it was B, maybe 2B or 2C, which dealt with the ban on gas in new construction. And I know a member, Peterson, had mentioned, and I'm aware that City Council had indicated maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, whenever the ban came out, Berkeley's ban came out, the City Council indicated that they were not going to entertain that until there was a decision. But since then, there has been, the trial court has made a decision upholding the ban. And I think it's worth revisiting it with the city council. I mean, it can take a long, long time for a matter to work its way all through the appeals courts. And the fact that this is, the appeal has not yet been decided has not prevented other cities from going forward with gas bans on new construction. So I feel it would be worth presenting it again to city council. And I think it is a very important, would be very important towards implementation of the climate plan. And the other comment I had was on another priority, which was on electric charging stations for electric vehicles. And at the December meeting, I had raised a concern that my understanding was that the city council several years ago had authorized the installation of, I think it was 5 EV charging stations. And we don't know what happened to that. And I think, Lizzie, you had said that you were going to look at it, but I think that it's important to look into that. And if it's possible to get that installation, that's will help us with the with our plan as well. And thank you. That's all I have.
Elaine, you may be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a rental housing provider, and on occasion, because I know the city of Albany is attempting to move in the direction of green energy, I have asked various people, electricians, plumbers, people who sell washers, dryers, hot water heaters, what I can purchase, you know, the greenest thing that I can purchase. And I think many of us are not aware of what's on the market. And so in terms of community education, I think it would be very nice to have a large sort of vendor event somewhere when, you know, when COVID dies down and we're allowed to look at different, you know, options of things to purchase. It would be very nice to know what is possible. So in terms of education, which I believe was one of your B, I think it was 5A or 5B, it would be very nice if you could reach out to property owners of all sorts, homeowners, rental housing providers, and restaurateurs, everyone, and just say, look, guys, this is the next time your hot water heater goes out, why don't you consider buying this? Like a large vendor event, just letting us know what's on the market would be super helpful. And then I wanted to ask you about the lawsuit that I think you said was going on in Berkeley. I'm not very familiar with that. One of your committee members mentioned that. I'm guessing if Albany doesn't want to move forward with that, it's because they don't want to get embroiled in a large, expensive legal battle. But I'd like to know a little bit more about that as well. Thank you so much.
I'm going to quickly encourage the last public speaker to go to bayren.org for some more information on appliances and contractors and vendors. Next speaker is Peter Campbell.
Yes, thank you. My concern is about the emphasis on renters and rental properties. This is an issue that affects everybody, and I am always concerned about just putting so much focus on just one small segment of the community. Not a small, substantial segment, but it's approximately half the community. The rentals and tenants constitute about half the property, half the city. It's an issue that affects everybody, will affect everybody, and I would hope that the emphasis could be expanded beyond just those two groups. I don't know why the rental properties and the tenants are always the targets of these actions. Also on charging vehicles, charging stations, you need to be really careful on that. The charging technology is in development right now, and to lock anything in is perhaps kind of fraught. On my car last night, I charged 10 kilowatt hours on a 240 circuit, and it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours. If you have public charging stations and people have to put in, say, 10 kilowatts to their car, and it takes 2 hours, and 10 kilowatts, by the way, is enough for about 30 or 40 miles of driving. If you have a bunch of people that are charging that much, you can imagine the lines that could be stacked up waiting for a charging station to open up. So there are a lot of issues there, and I hope you're considering all of them as you go on here and don't jump to any rapid conclusions. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Ed Crowley. You may be on mute.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, my concern is that this emphasis on electrifying rental properties, have you considered that electric utilities are still substantially more expensive for heat and cooking than gas? And that but you seem to have this concern for the lower income people and feel they're being left out of this process. How do you reconcile those two disparate concepts? And then I have a second question that you can take and consider is, have you considered paring down your list from a whole bunch of items that you can maybe do a little bit on to a handful of items that you can actually complete? Thank you.
I don't see any other members of the public with their hand raised. So Chair Chen, we'll take it back to you.
Yeah, I think we'd like to have any discussion on any of those items. I know that we are getting close to 9 p.m., so we may need a motion to extend the meeting.
I would also recommend a motion to extend. I think there's still 3 more agenda items.
I'll make a motion to extend to 9:30.
I'll second.
Okay. Committee member Breeding. Come back. Committee member Fasoon.
Yes.
Committee member Larson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Merchant.
Yes.
Committee member Mira Venkatesh.
Yes.
Committee member Peterson.
Yes.
Chair Chen.
Yes.
Okay, extended to 9:30. Motion carries. There's no action that needs to be taken on this item, just for clarification, but if the committee would like to continue discussing, back to you, Chair Chen, to lead the discussion.
Yeah, yes. Any last thoughts after public comment? Committee member Larson?
Yeah, I was thinking about what Lizzie said about the process for, making a proposal, and the fact that the subcommittee, worked, brought information to the committee, and that seemed to be a fairly workable process. So in the interest of getting to work, I was going to propose a new subcommittee for the zero emission transportation, to identify specific work items that we can bring to this committee to act on proposals, because I'm interested in that. So I don't know if that's the appropriate time to do that, but just wanted to kick that off. Because I think we closed the EV action, or the subcommittee, after we did the charging station.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like that's appropriate. So just to be clear, there's a motion to establish a subcommittee to choose actions related to zero emission transportation to bring forward to the committee. Is there a second for that motion?
I had a question on that first, maybe to ask Eric. So it sounded like you had, and maybe this is for Lizzie also, usually we try to make the subcommittees pretty targeted to what they're doing. I'm not sure if this one's too broad. Yeah, or maybe it could just be a develop more zero emission transportation, a committee to develop the next zero emission transportation program.
Yeah, can I just answer? I mean, I guess what I had in mind is from the climate, like I said in my statement, the climate action plan already has a list of items that I think are high priority for specifically to meet that specific work item. So I think the subcommittee would first off go through a priority of those items and choose one or two, like the member from the public said, choose a couple and get them done. So first off, proposing to the committee the priorities and then working on the proposal.
I think that sounds fine. I think that is targeted enough.
Okay, I second.
Okay. I just, before we make this motion, Committee Member Larson, I'm going to call it the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee.
Okay.
Okay. Committee Member Breeding. Committee Member Fasoon.
Yes.
Committee Member Larson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Merchant.
Yes.
Committee Member Mira Venkatesh.
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson.
Yes.
Chair Chen.
Yes.
And I'll call one more time for Committee Member Breeding.
Yes.
Motion carries. And we should probably establish who is in that subcommittee. I'm guessing Committee Member Larson.
I'd like to be, yes.
Any others?
I'm more than happy to be on it, although please, others, love to have more others.
Well, just one other.
Yeah, right. But if there are more than two other that want to be on it, I'm more than happy to withdraw.
Any others? It just cannot be more than 3, but it can be 2 if there are no others. Okay. Others can join at any time since it's only 2. We'll just need to discuss it at a CAC meeting. Okay, great. I have the motion recorded.
All right. Committee Member Peterson?
There were a couple questions that were asked, some of them a little bit philosophical by the audience, but one that I wanted to respond to was about the the no gas rule. And it actually has been discussed back with the city attorney, even though it's an appeal. And the advice from the city attorney is to wait through the whole appeal process. They're obviously being very conservative on it, but Albany being a very small community, they didn't want to risk it all getting tied into some litigation as some sort of tangential suit to that. That's my understanding, but that has been, just so the person who asked that has been brought before and addressed, and we're kind of, it's a critical thing, but we think we have some good other ways of mitigating that, both the large developments that are now underway in Albany, both at the Saha affordable housing project and the Albany Bowl, cities having direct communications with the developers, and it looks like there's going to be a good chance of electrification on those new projects. And as other ones come along, we'll definitely be pushing that. And there are stretch codes that emphasize electrification also.
Okie doke. If there are no other thoughts on item 6-1, the next item in the agenda is 6-2, point of sale electrification mandate update and discussion. And I believe the subcommittee is presenting on this item.
Yeah, I put together a little slide deck, and if I can share, I'll bring that up. Okay. And please bear with me, I'm not the greatest on yeah, this little thing is always in the way. Okay, so now I can't see anybody. Sorry, it takes a little while to load. So, report on point of sale electrification pilot. So as you know, we met with North Lennox, who is an energy analyst, to review a pilot project proposal he had for using an app he had developed, House Grades, in Albany to essentially grade homes that were for sale on the basis of energy efficiency, and then also how far they've gone in electrification, so that people who are considering the homes have some idea of how, you know, how future ready they kind of are. So it was an interesting concept. It was, in our minds, it was a little bit better than the, House Grades. I've got to go backwards. Sorry about that. A little bit better than the House Grades. You would know this one well. I don't want to have to do slides. Sorry about that. So it's a little bit better than House Grades in that it does lean toward, it does an evaluation of electrification. And so, you know, there was a certain amount of cost in doing the pilot, which wasn't unreasonable, but there were a couple issues as far as open source and proprietary systems, and also having a system that isn't like an industry recognized system. It, you know, this sort of, we brought this forward at the last meeting, and it seemed like other committee members weren't very comfortable with just going down that route. So we went back and looked at this again, and came up with this idea that maybe have Stop Waste evaluate House Grades. Stop Waste has been contracted by PG&E to investigate expanding the Berkeley BASO program to other communities. And they're also associated with the DOE on the home energy score. And they're certified to, you know, do those, collect that data. Then, you know, if Stop Waste found merit in the House Grades, then we would partner with Stop Waste and House Grades to develop a pilot project and then bring it to City Council. Well, I went ahead and talked to Lennox about that. And he actually pointed out that Stop Waste is pretty invested with the home energy score. And it sounded like he, you know, he felt unless we wanted to just do it direct with him, that you know, there wasn't, it wouldn't work to kind of merge with Stop Waste. And in reaching out to stop waste. I haven't sort of taken that step yet, but know that they're more involved with the home energy score process. So at this point, it seems like that's something we're not going to directly pursue in that manner. But I think there are other options to address, because at point of sale is still such an opportune time to ensure that at least people consider certain things when they're fixing up a home for sale or thinking of buying a home. And I think there's a great opportunity here to actually do outreach to the real estate community and get their input and come up with a program that they actually support, and that maybe we base it around a series of incentives that could be implemented by a homeowner when selling their property, and that would prioritize electrification. So what I had in mind there was that maybe we would take a certain amount of funds from BD and say, well, if you put in like a heat pump water heater, or if you put in a heat pump building HVAC system, get rid of the old gas system. If you put in a heat pump clothes dryer, all of these are dependent on getting rid of gas, putting in the electric replacement, or maybe even electrical panel upgrade if the current panel is under 100 amps. Electric cooking appliances, a lot of times I'll go to an open house and they've shoved in that brand new gas-fired cooktop. They've got the Wolf range with thousands of BTU of gas available right there in the kitchen to poison your environment, but they don't do induction cooktops. So it could be incentives on that, or even for an EV charge station. And then there's this idea that here people are doing a sale of a property that's going to garnish them, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million, depending on how long they own the home. And we're giving them incentives, but the incentives would be in the form of rebates that would be reduced by the percentage of the sale cost exceeded the listing cost, which I think is a fair way to sort of balance it. So anyway, rather than, let's just cut to the chase, rather than having people go first through an evaluation, get an idea of a score, find out what it takes to do the score, then maybe, perhaps, no guarantee, do some of the improvements. Why not just do an incentive program where we know what we want them to do? We want them to get rid of gas appliances, we want them to electrify, we want them to be efficient. And we would have a program, at least a pilot program, that had set number incentives. They would be tempered by whether, if they made a killing on the house, if it went 100% over, they wouldn't get any rebate on it. But they would be happy because they made such a huge amount on the house. Anyway, that's the idea I'm sort of moved more towards. I think it's more efficient, easier to put in place. And I think we would get a faster buy-in from our friends and real estate agents than if we were to require scoring and that type of issue. And I'd be really happy to see what people think about that.
Yeah, and just one thing to add here is that for that input from sort of the real estate community and the stakeholders, we're thinking some sort of focus group or some sort of collective information gathering session that's up for debate. But our hope is for to understand the needs before we're offered a solution. That's kind of the direction that we were taking in.
Yeah, anybody have any? I'd love to hear feedback on that. I know it's a slightly different idea, the rating. For those of you who didn't know, that the Climate Action Committee actually spent a couple years mulling over having Albany do its own, I think we call it a building energy disclosure, energy analysis and disclosure. So it would be a BETO. And we did a pilot project, and it didn't, the home energy score is kind of an awkward tool, especially for electrification. Doesn't really help with that. And our pilot project sort of seemed to imply that it didn't really do much. Now, since then, I've heard more information from the Berkeley plan, and the studies they've done there is actually, there's been about a 6% incentive in energy efficiency improvements of homes that went through that program. That about 6% of people who bought the homes went on to do some of the suggested improvements. 6% isn't nothing, but it isn't huge. Where I think if we had the actual incentives and someone said, yes, I'll put in a heat pump water heater, and they did it, that then we're getting it right before they even sell the place. So that was the idea.
Nick, could you put up that last slide again, just so we have that as a reference while we talk about it?
Sure, I'll try in my awkward little, I don't know how to make this, how do I make this slide? No, that's not it. I guess I have to go and do the view slideshow.
I think it's okay just like that.
Oh, this'll get the whole thing there eventually. Loading. There we go. Yeah. That's what you meant, right?
Yeah, thank you.
This is my new option on a point of sale program, that starts out being vetted with real estate community, maybe even bring in people who are thinking of selling their homeowners, and come up with, what it seems like they would be interested in, but it would be based on, it would be incentives for electrification. And, energy efficiency, I think, is also part of that. But I was more focused on the electrification ones. Those actually eliminate emissions.
So I have a question. How would we have to create a timeline around what constitutes upgrades that are for the purposes of selling a property? Because some of these things, because we've talked about other incentive programs around electrification, and how would we define this one as specific to being point of sale? Like if somebody's kind of upgrading over time with a view that they're going to sell the property, is it time limited? Maybe some of these things take them a while to actually implement based on contractor availability, and also some of the issues that we're seeing right now in terms of supply chain issues, like an induction range that I had ordered got pushed back by a year. So there might be certain time limitations that'll make it hard to track. For point of sale.
All excellent questions. I hadn't really thought it out that far. I was thinking more if things, and maybe COVID era isn't the right time to initiate something like this. So maybe not this year, but next, would think more about doing something when things are back to a little bit normal time frame. But I think the way it would work is if someone, we'd have to establish that it would have to be within a certain period of time of the sale, and at least 8 months or 12 months or something. And if they elected not to sell, and they did the work anyway, well, good, we got them to do it, and they're benefiting from it. But if they elect to sell and then it falls into this, weighted benefit back after the point of sale. The main thing would be the outreach. I think the main thing out of this is the outreach to the real estate community and getting them thinking in this manner, which was also the idea of the rating system, was that as the rating became more accepted and universal, people would start saying, it's like walking score, which became a big thing with real estate. People say, well, this house has a electrification score of 10, it's a perfect. And, there'd be a little bit of competition to try to get, as best as possible. But this sort of avoids trying to get into that mode and just is an incentive, right? And also gets the information out to the industry, which I think there's a parallel here to what Bayren has started doing with their incentives for heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC, is that they are now giving incentives to not only the homeowner, but also to the contractor, so that the contractor has an interest and has an investment and gets trained and becomes knowledgeable, because those are the people on the front line that are running into, if you're a realtor, people who want to sell their home, or if you're a contractor, people who want to change their appliances. And those are the real people that we would really want to reach and train. So I just thought there might be a way of also being more directed on the specific upgrades that we think within Albany's housing stock are more reasonable for moving towards electrification. So I'm not sure what the next step is on this. I'll stop my screen share. I'm open to, I mean, I guess we're not at a point where we can say, hey, let's take this to city council, but if people sound interested, I would put this more together with Harshita, and, you know, we would bring it back in more detail, maybe answer some of the questions Vice Chair Merchant brought up.
Committee Member Larson? Oh, I think you're muted.
Are we just asking questions or commenting at this point? Is this discussion?
Questions. We should do public comment before.
Okay, Nick, I didn't want to pass by Nick's request for feedback from the committee, so I'll wait.
Chair Chen, should we open it for public comment?
Yeah, I think so.
At this time, if any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature on Zoom. Okay, we have one member of the public so far with their hand raised. One sec. You may be having trouble with the clock. I can do this one manually, Johnny, and then we can. Oh, there we go.
I apologize. It was showing the wrong Chrome window.
Do not worry. Peter Campbell?
Yeah, I'm trying to say, where's all this money going to come from? That you talk about how much money the sellers are making on the sale of their property. Well, the market's pretty good right now, I understand. But what happens when the market is not good and suddenly the houses start selling for less than the asking price? And how much are these things going to cost? I hope you're all considering what these things are going to cost. I have no idea what a heat pump dryer, for example, or even if that exists, or what that would cost, or what a heat pump water heater would cost, or any of these things. I don't know what they're going to cost, but if you're going to start requiring all these things, are you talking about a few $100s or a few $1,000s or a few tens of thousands of dollars? What is it going to cost? I hope you're considering that, because a real estate transaction, the market is what it is. The market sets what the price, the negotiated price is. And people are not going to be too, if the cost is prohibitive, people are not going to be too excited to do any of that stuff. So hope to take that into consideration, what all this stuff is going to cost. Thanks.
Lucinda Young?
Yes, I just wanted to offer my opinion that this is a terrific idea. I think it has a great potential to raise awareness among buyers and realtors of the importance of a sustainable home. And I would really like to see it explored further. And just to address the previous speaker, my understanding is these items are not being required. This is and that rebates would be offered possibly to do these. In any event, I think this is would really like to see further exploration of this. I think it has great potential. That's all I have to share.
Ed Crowley?
The asking price of a house is completely arbitrary. All you'll do is just have people set high asking prices and maybe settle for less. The idea that you could come up with some formula based on the spread between an asking price and the price paid is extraordinarily naive. I'm done.
There are currently no other members of the public with their hand raised. Back to you, Chair Chen.
Yeah, so let's open discussion of this item. I guess I could start with one comment. I like the direction of having some kind of rebate or incentive for building electrification. One idea that struck my head when you were talking through this, Nick, is I think that there's a similar program, possibly only with the city of Berkeley, I'm not really sure, but it's a disaster resilience mitigation effort for seismic retrofits. And I think the way it works is that it is possible to receive a reduction of the transfer tax paid on transfer of a new property for eligible seismic retrofit upgrades. And I think the whole idea is that in general, it's good for the city to have seismic retrofitting done on houses because it reduces all sorts of negative externalities that occur when an earthquake occurs. I think you could make a very similar argument for electrification upgrades that benefit air quality, that benefit the environment. And I think that, a program that is structured in a similar fashion to that could be desirable. I think that might sort of avoid a lot of the issues that members of the public raised around either forcing a buyer or seller to incur these costs by making them part of a reduction of a transfer tax. And I think in some ways it might benefit the real estate community by helping buyers feel like they're maybe getting more for their money when they do have to pay a rather high transfer tax as we have in Alameda County. So if that's not something that the subcommittee's considered, that's something that I think would be kind of an interesting idea to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously has to be wait that out. And it still needs a lot of information put on it. I think comments from the public were there, although I did, this isn't forcing people to do it. Again, we realize, well, we're trending, the idea is per our climate action and adaptation plan is that by 2045, there'll be no gas available at all. It'll be gone. We'll have gotten rid of it. Along with that, there'll probably be some sort of requirements that you can't pollute using fossil fuels or something of that nature. So what we want to do is as early on as possible is start to get people thinking of what a zero emissions home is like. And instead of popping in the big gas powered ranges, maybe considering the electrification options. So it starts out as just a mild incentive program. So it isn't offensive. I mean, requiring people to do that would be upsetting. And I'm thinking of it as similar to how the sewer lateral upgrades happened in Albany, where now you cannot sell a home in Albany that has a poor performing sewer lateral. You have to improve it. And you're not allowed to have infrastructure that is polluting groundwater. So at some point, I imagine in Albany, you will not be allowed to sell a home that pollutes the environment the way that gas burning does. Maybe not, who knows, but that's sort of what we're trying to get to. So coming up with a program, Albany can only do so much, as a community. We have a few little places where we can try to encourage people through certain types of incentives or regulations to do the right thing. So that may be naive to think that we can actually accomplish that, but I think we need to start the conversation. And at least having an incentive program does it in a positive bent rather than a negative bent. I mean, if you just bang people over the head and say you can't, you know, it's illegal to sell your home until you do X, I think they're going to be, that'll actually never fly. So point of sale is an opportunity. Maybe it's an opportunity we can't use. Yeah, there are some dicey questions, you know. How can you make it fair? How can you just not have people use it to skim money when they shouldn't? But the main thing is that we get gas appliances out and electric appliances that are powered by 100% sustainable clean energy from EBC or potentially from solar systems on these homes. So more open, people can contact me if they have better ideas on how to do this. I know what the pitfalls are. I'm actually not naive.
Committee Member Larson?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I like the direction you're going. I think it's a good idea. I think that it's, you know, it's taking the human psychology of house selling into consideration. That's when people are open to the idea of investing in appliances. And like you pointed out, Nick, people invest in a lot of, you know, high-end stuff when they're trying to sell a house. So this is using an incentive exactly for, you know, just the base purpose of an incentive. You try to incentivize people to do the right thing, to move the direction that we as a city want them to move when they're going to do something anyway. So I think that it's a good opportunity. I like the direction you're going, and I know that you'll flesh it out with some of the questions that were raised. So.
Yeah, and again, I think the idea here is, again, it's a pilot project. I mean, we may find out this is completely untenable. People don't like it. It's too difficult. There are too many hurdles. But again, is there a way we can capture this point in time to motivate people to do the right thing? I think it deserves some thought.
Any other comments? All right, I think that concludes item 6-2. We are coming up on 9:30 and we have 2 more agenda items. Can we get a motion to extend the meeting further? I know that this is kind of a lot to ask.
Well, I will say that I think we actually have already talked about both of our subcommittees during the course of this meeting, so I suspect that'll be pretty short. So whatever extension we do, I think could just be to cover the election of the vice chair, future agenda items, and announcing the next meeting. So should we say 15 minutes? That would be my proposal if somebody actually wants to actively propose that. But I think that should be, I would say that should be enough time. So I'll propose it that we extend the meeting to 9:45.
I'll second.
Okay, Committee Member Breeding?
Yes.
Committee Member Fasoon?
Yes.
Committee Member Larson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Merchant?
Yes.
Committee Member Mira Venkatesh?
Yes.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yes.
Chair Chen?
Yes.
All right, meeting extended to 9:45.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is 6-3, subcommittee updates. I think we did have a presentation from the point of sale electrification mandate subcommittee. Do we have a quick subcommittee update from the engagement and outreach subcommittee?
I don't know that we have an update. It's just what we had talked about when we were discussing our work plan for the year in terms of how we are looking to shift our engagement. And we are talking with committee member Fasoon about partnering with the high school around something.
All righty. So I guess that update is pretty quick. Lizzie, do we go to public comment for subcommittee updates or?
Yes. Okay, At this time, if any members of the public would like to make a comment about this item on the agenda, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature on Zoom. Not seeing any hands raised. Back to you, Chair Chen.
All right. And next on the agenda is item 6-4, election of a chair and vice chair.
I have a very brief couple of slides to share with the committee. Okay, I just want to give a brief overview since we are selecting potentially a new chair and vice chair of what the role of the chair and the vice chair is, so that if you are nominated or would like to nominate yourself, you know what you're getting yourself into. The role of the chair is to oversee the public debate, ensure public comment is heard in the proper fashion that it should be heard, facilitates meeting and decision-making processes. The chair and vice chair optionally join once a month for an agenda prep meeting in which we consider all the items that were called for on future agenda items and any requests that came in between meetings. And using that, we set the agenda. And then the vice chair, of course, similar to most other vice elected officials, takes place of the chair in the event of the chair's absence. This is a snippet taken from another advisory body's agenda. I'm just going to read it for more clarification. Vice chair and chair reorganization takes place to provide the opportunity for all members of advisory bodies to hold a leadership role. The advisory body handbook states that the position of chair and vice chair shall be rotated on an annual basis in January or February. Although not recommended, if the advisory body agrees that there is a strong preference to continue with the existing chair and or vice chair, they may serve for a maximum of 2 consecutive years in the role. So both our current chair and vice chair could continue to serve if they were nominated and wished to do so. The way this will happen is we will begin with the chair election, then we will conduct a vice chair election. Nominations can be made by any committee member and it does not require a second. So we're not making motions, we're just doing nominations. Nominations will be voted on one by one, with the last person nominated being voted on first. And then the majority vote secures the position. And as soon as we have a nominee reach a majority vote, we will stop counting votes. Okay. With that, I turn it back to the committee. Last time we did this, we did receive public comment. So maybe we want to open it up very quickly to public comment and then go back for nominations. Is that okay, Chair Chen?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Any members of the public would like to raise their hand to speak on this item, please do so now. Not seeing any hands raised. Back to you, Chair Chen.
Yeah, so I guess we should take nominations for the chair first. I will say I've learned a lot from being the chair. I'd encourage every member of this committee to consider taking on this role, even if you are new to the committee. Like the handbook stated, it is possible for me to continue on as chair, but I think it is recommended to rotate the chair position every year. So definitely welcome other nominations. Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Vice Chair Merchant for chair.
I actually need to decline the nomination. Thank you so much. I really liked serving as vice chair, but I have some personal stuff going on that it would make it hard for me to do that right now. But thank you so much for the nomination.
Yeah, well, that's perfectly understandable. In which case, I'll nominate Mira Virkatich. If you would like to accept, I think you'd make a great chair.
Oh, I greatly appreciate it. I mean, one thing that I will be candid about is, since I am a renter and I do live in University Village, there is a chance that we'll probably get kicked out once my husband graduates, in which case we will have to look for new housing, which ideally would be in Albany, but as we've talked about, it really sort of depends on where we live next. But I do really appreciate the nomination, and I'm honored.
Just for clarification, for committee member Mira Venkatesh, you can serve as chair until and if you are no longer a resident of Albany, at which point if you were to leave the committee, we would conduct a midterm chair election. So if that helps inform your decision whether or not to accept the nomination. And I apologize, but I wasn't totally clear if you accepted it or not.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think that my current bandwidth may not allow for it either. I would member Peterson be interested in being the chair? I mean, it seems like you have quite a bit of experience, especially given our priorities for this year around electrification and electrification of housing and transportation. It sort of might be up your alley. You're on mute.
Oh, I've been chair before. If you want to nominate me, I would consider it. Sure.
All right, I nominate member Peterson.
Yes, we got to have a actual election here. Did Chair Chen say he's no longer interested?
I'd be happy to accept the nomination, but I'd really love for a newer member of the committee to take this opportunity. So I will nominate member Fasoon. I will mention that the chair prior to me was our student member and she did an amazing job of it. So I'd love to nominate you to be the chair of the committee.
Thank you so much. Yeah, sure. And I'll also nominate committee member Peterson if you would be interested as well.
I'm already nominated, so it's a runoff between us.
Oh, do you not re-nominate people? Like second? Okay, my apologies.
That's okay. Are there any other nominations? We currently have committee member Fasoon and committee member Peterson for the role of chair. Okay. Hearing none, we will vote in the order of the last person nominated being voted on first, which would be committee member Fasoon. I'll do roll call vote. Committee member Breeding. Gone. Committee member Fasoon.
Do I?
Aye. Aye or no? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear yours.
If I'm nominated, can I say no and then say yes for committee member Peterson?
You could, but you're also welcome to vote for yourself if you'd like. It's
I'll
just
vote
aye
for
or no.
committee member Peterson.
Okay. Committee member Larson.
Yes for Fasoon.
Vice Chair Merchant.
Yes.
Committee member Mira Venkatesh.
Yes.
Committee member Peterson.
Yes.
Chair Chen.
Yes.
Okay. Committee member Fasoon is our 2022 chair. Congratulations, committee member Fasoon.
Thank you so much.
We will now take nominations for the vice chair position.
Well, I wonder if vice chair is, would Mira Venkatesh be interested in doing vice chair?
I would allow, assuming that the committee does not potentially mind a mid-year re-election in case I do have to move out of Albany.
I think it would be a very easy addition to our agenda should we need to do it.
All right.
Okay, so I nominate you.
Okay. Any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Committee member Fasoon?
Yes.
Committee member Larson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Merchant?
Yes.
Committee member Mira Venkatesh,
Yes.
committee member Peterson,
Yes.
Chair Chen.
Yes.
All right, committee member Mira Venkatesh is our vice chair. Committee member Fasoon is our chair. Congratulations to our new chair and vice chair, and thank you, Chair Chen and Vice Chair Merchant, for your fantastic leadership during this 2021 Climate Action Committee year. I have really enjoyed working with you both, and look forward to continuing our work together on the committee in a new capacity.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is there a formal transition process that will, or okay, got it.
I'll send you and committee member Fasoon an email tomorrow asking for us to set an agenda prep monthly meeting. And that's about as formal as it will be. And we can do a quick chair, vice chair training. But nothing too huge. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
I saw committee member Peterson raise his hand.
I was just going to say, you guys are going to do great. Don't worry about it. Lizzie will bring you up to speed really well. So I think you'll enjoy doing it. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so I think that concludes item 6-4. So that is our agenda for today. I guess the last item is future agenda items. So if you have items that you'd like to request for a future agenda, now's the time to raise those. Committee member Peterson?
Yeah, because it was raised a couple times when we talked about our work plan. Would it make sense to have our work plan with items that have been done on it sort of maintained and reviewed, a couple times a year or something like that, rather than waiting for, this big work plan assessment once a year thing? I'm just wondering if that's something we want to consider for not a standing item on the agenda, but maybe in the next 3 months or so.
Like a marked up version of the work plan. I think we shouldn't change the actual work plan itself.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it that we're modifying the work plan. What I'm saying is we would have a sort of status version of it where we have put down what we've done per each item. And, so when we had this discussion, where we talked about what have we done, what happened, I think it would just really help everyone to have something that's sort of tracking our progress. And then it will help us when we make our next work plan, being able to list what we did and the whole thing. I mean, just a standard thing that's brought up. It's not an edit. It's a working document towards the next work plan. I just think that it seemed like we spent a lot of time kind of regrouping when we were talking about the work plan. So I think it would be a useful tool to maintain.
I'm not sure if that's a future agenda item, so much as you're just asking for us to create a document that you can reference at the next meeting without a discussion of it.
Yeah, I mean, part of this goes back to something I've been bringing up before, which is just knowing where we are in the process of implementing the CAP. So it's sort of like knowing where we are in the process of implementing the work plan. Could just be a reference doc.
Committee member Mira Venkatesh?
Yeah, one agenda item I'd like to propose, since it was one of my initial goals while joining the Climate Action Committee, is I really would love a representative member or a community leader from University Village to sort of give a presentation on some of our internal initiatives, maybe our internal workings, points of contact, something along those lines. I'm open to it being tailored, but just in a way that sort of would allow University Village to connect with the Climate Action Committee. I'd really, as we mentioned before, community equity is something we strive for, and as maybe the lowest earning section of the community and also perhaps the most transient community, I definitely do want them to feel involved in Albany and the happenings in Albany. And I think it'd be great to just get them on board here. And I'm open to sort of connecting you or sort of figuring out how to coordinate that.
That would be much appreciated. Yeah, we should connect tomorrow about that.
That sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Any other future agenda items?
Oh, can we make sure we have under the subcommittee updates that we have the new subcommittee there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Any other future agenda items? I think we're technically should make a call for public comment.
Yeah, let's make a call for public comment.
Any member of the public who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. Seeing none, back to you, Chair Chen.
All right. I think that's all the items in our agenda. So the next meeting is February 16th with the new chair and vice chair, which will be very exciting. So with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.